I don't think it's helpful for Israel to come out and oppose this one opportunity to change a major dynamic, which is downhill, a downhill dynamic in this part of the world. Well, I think he said what he's had to say, and to be candid with you, this can backfire on him. And I wish that he would contain himself, because he has put out no real alternative. In his speech to the Congress, no real alternative. Since then, no real alternative.
Well, that's a lie, as the anchor there interrupted her and said, yes, he has. He said, ramp up the sanctions. And she laughed and hemmed and hawed and choked a little, and then she didn't like that solution. But he did give an alternative. Joining us now is Jim Gilmore, former governor of the great state of Virginia, president of Free Congress Foundation. And Governor, welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much, Steve. Pleasure to be with your listeners.
Let me start maybe at the end, but I consider it the beginning. Tomorrow we have Rand Paul, who's expected to announce his candidacy for the presidency. We had, of course, Ted Cruz. We know there are others on the horizon, and we know that Hillary, now we're told it's weeks away, so hold your breath for that one. But where are you on deciding whether or not to throw your hat into the ring, sir?
Well, thank you, Steve. Listen, I think that the question is, am I an appropriate alternative to the various and sundry candidates that are out there right now, based on my experience and credentials, governor of Virginia, deep foreign policy experience. And the question is, can my voice play a useful role in this nomination process? And we're talking to people in New Hampshire right now. I'm visiting New Hampshire frequently. I've already been there 3 times in the last month. I'm going twice more in the next month. And we'll see how that goes. If I'm well received in New Hampshire, then maybe it's something that will be possible.
All right. Well, good luck with that, and I know you'll keep us posted. Now, as far as Dianne Feinstein, I find her remarks very troubling. Dismissive of the Prime Minister, warning the Prime Minister, while later in the interview praising the Iranian government, specifically the President and the Ayatollah, who she believes she could trust, and they both want this deal.
Well, I think it would be better if we moved Iran back into the concert of nations, but they haven't behaved that way now for decades and decades. And so I think that if you go back to the old Reagan principle, trust but verify, that means that we have to know that this is a deal that is not going to lead to an Iranian weapon through cheating or even through the terms of the agreement. And this is such a weighty matter. The Prime Minister of Israel has a right in his national security to weigh in the debate and to talk in international terms. He has a right to do that. And we do too, Steve. We have a right to exactly understand what this deal is and consider its implications, and not simply to say, well, the president's done something, so that's okay with us. I think we have a right to assess it.
Right, and you wrote a piece in the Washington Times saying reveal what's in the deal. And, of course, there is no technical deal yet, and what we know, doesn't seem all that favorable. But I'll ask this question that I've asked of others, Governor. How do you deal with Iran in a vacuum when at the same time they're holding 3 Americans? One's a Marine, one is in prison simply because he's a Christian, he's a pastor, Abedini. Now there are reports today that they're arming and financing the rebuilding of the underground tunnels that Hamas had destroyed. They're trying to rebuild that for Hamas. We know they support Hezbollah. They just took over Yemen. They're in Iraq. How do you negotiate with them in the vacuum of just the nuclear issue when everything else is off the table?
Precisely so. The real long-term issue is Iran going to be a civilized country in the community of nations or not? And if not, you certainly can't let them have a nuclear weapon. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with none of these other issues you've raised being on the table, no inclusion of any of the issues of the development of missiles. They're going to be able to keep a nuclear program, although a scaled-back one to be sure. They're not going to suffer any consequences from their violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is what they certainly have been doing. It's a term of years on this, so we have to assess what that really means here. So there's a lot of issues that still deserve to be assessed. And I don't think that Dianne Feinstein slamming down either Netanyahu or any of us is an appropriate way for a senator to conduct this kind of issue, as significant, as important as it is.
Yeah, do you think the June 30th deadline means anything? Because no other deadline has meant anything.
I think that if they don't meet that deadline, it's going to empower people who are nervous about this treaty. And by the way, it is a treaty. And my article made the point
Yep.
that this is something where the Senate and the House need to be fully
Absolutely.
engaged.
Absolutely. Not the United Nations Security Council, but rather the Senate.
Just so.
You're absolutely right. Governor, always great to talk to you, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and thanks for the chance to speak to Newsmax.
It's always my pleasure. Thank you, Governor Jim Gilmore, ladies and gentlemen. No, it's a great piece. Check it out at the Washington Times, WashingtonTimes.com. Reveal What's in the Deal with Iran by James S. Gilmore III. And we really don't know. I mean, you know, we've heard bits and pieces, but if you listen to the Iranians, what they're telling their people, it's different than what Obama is telling us. So who's making it up? Maybe, as our previous guest Roger Simon said, a little of both. Hank Scheinkopf is next. Don't go away.